Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the NBA slate on Draftkings and Yahoo for Friday, February the 26th. Gonna run through Friday's 9-game slate, break it all down team by team like we always do. We'll go through each game, we'll talk about each team for this 9-game slate. I'll give you guys my early thoughts, what does stand out to me looking at the slate the night before, what does stand out from each team. But before we do get started with the breakdown, guys, as always, I would appreciate it if you hit that like button down below. If you are new to the channel here, be sure to click that subscribe button as well. Click the notification bell so that way you do get notified every time I upload. You also get notified every time I do go live. Once again, I will be live streaming this afternoon, probably around 4:30 Eastern time, since we do have a later lock today. Since lock is at 7:30, I will probably stream a little bit later, around 4:30 Eastern time. So if you are free then, you can tune into my YouTube channel. I'll be live answering all you guys' questions. We'll be talking through everything for tonight's slate. You know, as always, if any news comes out throughout the day, we can always touch on that in the live stream. So tune into that Friday afternoon. Hit that like button, guys. Hit that subscribe button. Also, check out my Patreon content. Link down below in the description. You know, if you do really enjoy these YouTube videos, you want to see more that I have to offer, I do have additional stuff that I post on Patreon, basically, you know, every single day. So check that out as well. But yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at Friday's 9-game slate. And we'll start off with the Celtics and Pacers game. So this is a pretty easy one to break down for me. There really isn't much that I like here. On the Pacers side, if I was going to play anyone on the Pacers today, it would be Sabonis and Brogdon. I think both, though, are just, you know, lower-owned contrarian options. You know, neither guy look like top options on this slate. It's a tough matchup. It's a pretty slow-paced game. I think this game has one of the lowest totals on the slate. There really isn't much to like here. But, you know, Sabonis and Brogdon, I think, are basically in play every slate just because they're so good. We know they're going to dominate the usage. So you could go to them in tournaments. Probably wouldn't really be considering them like in cash games or anything. And then on the Celtics side, it's kind of the same thing. Like Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kemba Walker, those three guys are basically in play every slate. You know, the price tag, I think, on Kemba makes him appealing. He's down to 6,200. You know, he's been pretty up and down lately. He had a really bad game against Dallas. I can't remember if that was the last game he played or the game before. Yeah, last game he played against Dallas, he wasn't that great. Just 32 DK points. Didn't have that great of a game against the Pelicans, but we did see a big game from Kemba against the Hawks. 52 Draftkings points in 34 minutes. I mean, he's back to playing like 34, 35 minutes, so it's 6,200. You know, he does feel a little bit too cheap, but really I don't like too much from this game. It's probably just going to be a void for me. Not much I'm looking to here, unless some news comes out during the day and, you know, that opens up plays here. This game's going to be one I pretty much avoid. So moving on to the next one, Houston and Toronto. So this one's not that appealing either. On Houston today, you know, this team is starting to get fully healthy. Victor Oladipo is back. Eric Gordon's healthy again. There really isn't much to like from Houston. You know, John Wall at 8,200 again. You know, John Wall's not normally someone I go all the way up to pay up for when Oladipo and Gordon are both healthy. Now, you know, when John Wall was getting all the usage without Oladipo, without Gordon, he was someone I was liking basically every slate. Now that both those guys are back, I just don't feel like I need to play John Wall at 8,200. Sure, he could go out there and put up, you know, a 45, 50-point game basically any night, but this doesn't really feel like a slate where I want to pay 8,200 for John Wall against the Raptors. I think Victor Oladipo's price tag makes him probably more appealing than Wall. He is $800 cheaper. He's only $7,400. If I was going to get to one of those two guys, I think I would prefer Oladipo given the savings. But I don't really like Eric Gordon at his price. I don't really like Jae'Sean Tate at his price. Same could be said for Daniel House, Nwaba. Like, this is just not that appealing of a Houston team. You know, Justin Patton's super cheap. He's been getting some center minutes with Christian Wood still out, with Boogie no longer on the team. But he's not going to really play enough to be DFS viable. He probably is going to play maybe 16 minutes, maybe 18 minutes. He's not going to be someone really considered on this slate. So Houston, another team I just don't have that much interest in today. Now looking at the Raptors are back to, you know, full strength now. They have Kyle Lowry back. Usually when this team is fully healthy, the only guys I consider on the Raptors are the top three, Van Vliet, Siakam, and Lowry. You know, Chris Boucher, I've played at times this year, but his minutes have started, you know, they've kind of been all over the place. This is a smaller Houston team. We know Houston plays small ball right now with PJ Tucker at the 5. So this does feel like a matchup where we would maybe get more minutes for Chris Boucher and probably less minutes for Aaron Baines. I think Boucher in tournaments he's probably going to be really low owned. You know, he hasn't been that good lately. His game log doesn't look pretty. I don't really see him getting much ownership. So, you know, if he does wind up getting 25, 26 minutes, which is possible here, we know Boucher has massive upside. Van Vliet, Siakam, Lowry, I think they're all viable on this slate. You know, I don't think either three of them, like all three of them. I don't think any of these three guys are going to be guys I get to like in my one lineup today. But if you are playing multiple lineups, I think you do want to have Van Vliet, Siakam, and Lowry in your player pool. I think Lowry, once again, is my favorite just because he's the cheapest of the three. $7K for Lowry does still feel a little bit too cheap. Facing a Houston team that is still playing pretty fast this year. They are, I'm pretty sure, like a top 10 team in pace. It is a pretty nice pace-up spot. We're going to get, 35, 36 minutes from Lowry if this game's close. We know he still has 45, close to 50-point upside. It's $7K. He's my favorite of the big three Raptors. I do have some interest in him. Chris Boucher, against a smaller Houston team, could see some more minutes, but that's probably it for Toronto. I mean, this isn't that appealing of a game either. So we can go ahead and move on to the next one, Phoenix and Chicago. So on the Suns today, I actually do like some of these Suns guys because it is a really good matchup. Starting off, you have Devin Booker at 8K. I'm fine getting to Booker on the slate. I think there's other shooting guards I would prefer over him that we're going to talk about later. But in this really good matchup, in a pace-up spot against the Bulls, I think Booker is viable. Straight up, though, I would rather go to Chris Paul. I do like Chris Paul quite a bit on this slate. I think he is a little bit too cheap. $7,500 on DK. I like that price tag. And on Yahoo, he's also affordable over there, coming in at $31. Look, we're going to get 35, 36 minutes from Chris Paul. That's what he's been playing in close games this year. It's a great matchup. It's a big-time pace-up spot. We know the Bulls. They're playing at a really fast pace this year. They've been, a pretty bad defensive team. I really like Chris Paul here. We've seen, even though this guy at this point in his career, he's getting older, he still has a ton of upside for fantasy. He can go out there and put up 50-plus fantasy points any night. He's got legit triple-double upside. He was 2 rebounds shy of a triple-double last game. I normally always prefer Paul over Booker just because Paul, he contributes more with the peripherals. He gets assists, he gets rebounds, whereas Booker, this season, playing alongside Chris Paul, has been a lot more scoring dependent. But I do really like Chris Paul in this matchup. I think he is definitely a little bit too cheap for the upside that he has against this, bad Bulls team that does play really fast. Then DeAndre Ayton I actually like quite a bit as well. Now, Ayton, he's kind of burned me these last few slates. I didn't play him last late against Charlotte, but I did play him against Portland. And he was actually on pace to have a pretty good game, but he only played 26 minutes because it was a blowout. Same thing in the Memphis game. I played him that game. Only played 22 minutes. It was a blowout there. But we've seen that Ayton still has plenty of upside. We know he's going to get probably 32 to 34 minutes if it's a close game, maybe a few more. We've seen him play 36, 37 minutes sometimes. At 6,800, for a fantasy point per minute player that's going to get 35, 36 minutes in a really good matchup against the Bulls, a Bulls team that's always been pretty bad defending big men. I really like Ayton here. I like the upside that he has. I think he is one of my favorite center plays overall today. So on DraftKings at 6,800, he feels like a pretty good play at that price tag. On Yahoo, I think he's a little bit too cheap over there as well, $25. So definitely like Chris Paul, definitely like DeAndre Ayton. Those are my two favorite guys from the Suns. I don't think I'm going to really be looking to anyone else, though, on this team outside of those two. So moving on to the Bulls side. The Bulls are not as appealing today. It's not that good of a matchup for them. It's a pace down spot against the Suns, who are playing really slow this year. The Suns are also a pretty solid defensive team. Zach LaVine, I guess you can say the same thing about him as I said, about Brogdon and Sabonis. Obviously Brogdon and Sabonis have massive upside any night, but it's not a great spot. At their price points, they don't feel like top plays today. I think the same could be said for Zach LaVine at 9,600. Again, there's other shooting guards I'd rather get to. We're going to talk about SGA, who I really like in his matchup, and he's cheaper than Zach LaVine. So I think, LaVine's viable. There's other guys I prefer over him, but I'm probably not going to be going to anyone else on the Bulls today. Wendell Carter has some upside. His price is coming up, though, at $5,900. He has had 2 back-to-back really good games. This isn't as good of a spot, though. Like, he got to face Houston. He got to face Minnesota. Not as good of a spot here against Phoenix. There's other centers I think I'd rather get to over Wendell Carter today. So yeah, I think we can go ahead and move on to the next game. Not too much to talk about on the Bulls today, at least not for me. I don't see too much I like on this team. So looking at Sacramento and Detroit, Sacramento pretty appealing once again. I do have some interest in some guys on the Kings here. This is a back-to-back for the Kings, so that is something to note. I assume everyone's going to be good to go, but just keep an eye on it. De'Aaron Fox, though, I think at 7,700. He once again does still feel too cheap. I'm pretty sure he did have a really good game against the Knicks on Thursday night, excuse me. He had 52 DraftKings points in 38 minutes. Look, that's the kind of upside that De'Aaron Fox has on a nightly basis. He was having a stretch where he wasn't really doing that well. He had like a week straight of just putting up pretty bad games. But then he bounced back on Thursday night, 52 against the Knicks in 38 minutes. Against a Detroit team that, is not good defensively at all. I wouldn't be surprised if we'd get another 50-plus point game from De'Aaron Fox. Anytime this guy's below 8K, he's going to be someone I look to roster, and I think at 7,700, obviously that's the case today. So definitely like De'Aaron Fox at his price tag. Marvin Bagley, like with Holmes and Harrison Barnes both, healthy now, I don't have that much interest in Bagley. He was playing pretty well. He came out and, played really well in the first quarter in that game, but then he got into some foul trouble. Ultimately only played 23 minutes. Like Bagley's just, I don't really get to Bagley when Holmes and Barnes are both healthy. The minutes are just all over the place. He could play 30 minutes, he could play 25 minutes, he could play 22 minutes. Like we don't really know with Bagley. Honestly, I probably would rather I'd rather get to Rashawn Holmes at the same price tag. I did like Holmes quite a bit on Thursday night slate against the Knicks. That didn't really go well. He only had 20 fantasy points in 28 minutes, just 9 points, 6 rebounds, 1 assist, and a steal. It wasn't a great game from Rashawn Holmes, but this is a guy that when he's playing 28 to 30 minutes, most nights he's going to give you over 30 fantasy points. He is a point-per-minute player. Detroit has been getting killed by big men this year. We've seen a lot of centers have huge games against the Pistons, so have some interest in Holmes. Once again, he's not a top play for me, but definitely someone I would have in my player pool if I was playing a lot of lineups. I do prefer Holmes over Marvin Bagley, but I don't think I'm going to be getting to anyone else on this Kings team. I think the two guys I like most are definitely De'Aaron Fox and Rashawn Holmes. So we can go ahead and move on to Detroit and look at the Pistons today. So on the Pistons, we do know that DeLon Wright, Blake Griffin are going to remain out. Saddiq Bey, he is currently questionable. So this will definitely be something to monitor. Saddiq Bey does play a good amount of minutes. He plays around 30 to 32 minutes a game. So if he were to be out, that would open up some more minutes. Most likely for a guy like maybe Svi Mykhailiuk. Maybe we would see Sekou Doumbouya get another start. Those guys would be viable, cheap options we could look to. We'll talk about them in a second. Before we get there, though, at the top, you do have Jeremy Grant for 7,300. I do have some interest in Jeremy Grant on this slate. It is a really good matchup against the Kings. We know the Kings, they do play at a really fast pace. They have been really bad defensively this year. Grant, lately he's kind of been up and down. He's been all over the place, but at this point, we know we're getting 36, 38 minutes a night from Jeremy Grant as long as it's a close game. He has a ton of upside here against this Kings team. I do like him a lot at 7,300. He's one of my favorite guys to get to from the Pistons today. Josh Jackson, now that Grant is back, I don't know if I want to pay 6,400 for Josh Jackson. That price tag just feels a little bit too high for my liking. I think he's still viable, but he doesn't really look like a top play. Now that Grant is back, if Saddiq Bey were to sit, that would be a nice boost for Jackson, but even at his price point, I wouldn't love him on this slate. But the guy that I do have a lot of interest in, once again, Saben Lee, 4,300 on DK, does still feel a little bit too cheap. On Yahoo, his price is starting to come up there. He's at $17, but I still think he's definitely viable even at that price point. We've seen Saben Lee play really well off the bench lately. His minutes, I think they're going to fluctuate from game to game. His minutes are all going to depend on how Dennis Smith Jr. is playing. Last game, Dennis Smith Jr. actually played pretty well, so we only saw Saben Lee get 22 minutes. But he was still really productive, had 28 DK points in that time. He's been really productive when given the opportunity lately. Just in these last 3 games with DeLon Wright out, we've seen Saben Lee play 33, 29, and 22 minutes off the bench, 30, 34, and 28 Draftkings points. My best guess today is that he probably plays 24 to 25 minutes and probably scores around 30 Draftkings points. And at that, 30 DK points at 4,300, I will take that all day. I think he is very likely to pay off this price tag once again. Even if Dennis Smith Jr. plays really well and Saben Lee only gets like 20 minutes, he's been so productive. He's been a point-per-minute player that he can still give you a good enough price or a good enough score to be good at his price tag. I think once Saben Lee starts to get to like up to 5K, that's probably when we can, maybe look away, look elsewhere. Don't have to go to him, but while he's still affordable at 4,300, and especially because there's not a ton of great value right now, I do once again like Saben Lee on this slate. He is someone I will for sure be looking to on the Pistons today. And you could play Dennis Smith Jr. He looked a lot better last game. He did get 26 minutes, had 31 DK points. I think his minutes are going to fluctuate from game to game, but if he is playing well, he does have the potential to get 25, 26 minutes. I think I'd rather go to Saben Lee because I feel better about Lee. I think Lee's a more productive player. But Smith Jr. is viable. I assume he will probably be low-owned. He was really low-owned on the last slate. But yeah, then these value guys, if Saddiq Bey were to sit and, if Svi Mykhailiuk were to start or Sekou Doumbouya were to start, they would definitely be in play for value. Sekou did start last game with Jeremy Grant resting. He wasn't great. He only played 23 minutes, just 10 fantasy points, but he's super, super cheap. If he were to start, he'd probably play, around 25, 26 minutes, maybe a few more if he's playing well. anytime we get guys that are starting that are this cheap, they're always viable in my opinion. So Sekou would be viable if he were to start for the Saddiq Bey. And if Svi Mykhailiuk were to start, he would also be viable at 3,400. But that does it for the Pistons. We can go ahead and move on to the next game. So we got the Clippers and the Grizzlies going up against each other. We saw these teams both play on Thursday. They were playing again on Friday. Kind of the same thing I said Thursday goes to today's slate. Like, none of the Clippers stand out as top plays for me. The price tags on Kawhi and PG I think are reasonable. Neither one of them look like that. Look like great value plays. This is a back-to-back for the Clippers, so that will be something to monitor. I would assume that everyone's going to play here, but we have seen Kawhi and PG rest on back-to-backs before, so just keep an eye on it. But assuming everyone's good to go, I really don't like that much from the Clippers. Kawhi and PG, they're fine, low-owned tournament options that you could target, but yeah, the Clippers are probably going to be a team I kind of look to stay away from on the slate, and kind of the same could be said for the Grizzlies as well. Outside of Ja Morant and Jonas Valanciunas, I really don't like anything else on this Memphis team. Morant at 7,100. Look, he's been someone I just can't seem to get right this year. He didn't have that good of a game Thursday. I didn't play him on Thursday's slate. He only played 30 minutes in a blowout. Did have 29 DK points. He's affordable at 7,100. You could look to Ja Morant on this slate, but I'd prefer Chris Paul. I'd prefer SGA. I'd prefer some other guards that we're going to talk about. Don't love Morant. Kind of the same can be said for Joe Val. Joe Val has plenty of upside. He's a great point per minute player. We saw him put up 41 DK points in just 25 minutes against the Clippers on Thursday. He could definitely go out there again on Friday and put up 40-plus fantasy points in 28 minutes. Because DeAndre Ayton is probably going to play 6-7 more minutes than J Val will, I do prefer to go to Ayton at the same price tag. But, J Val is in play for tournaments. He should be pretty low owned. Him and Morant are the only guys I like from Memphis. I don't think I'm going to play anyone else on this Grizzlies team. As long as everyone's playing here, there's not too much I like. We'll have to keep an eye on it. Maybe some guys wind up resting, but yeah, if they're good to go, if everyone's good to go, J Val, Morant, the only two guys I'll be looking to on the Grizzlies. So moving on to the next game, Utah and Miami. So on Utah, this is another team that I just don't have that much interest in. This Utah team in this matchup against the Heat, it's not a great spot. This Utah team is starting to get healthy again. They have, Conley back. Looking at the price tags here, I think the only guy I would be looking to would probably be Mike Conley. I think he is my favorite guy to target from the Jazz, 6,100. His minutes have been starting to trend up since he came back from injury. Played 25 minutes against the Clippers, 29 against the Hornets. Only played 27 last game against the Lakers, but that was a huge blowout. He would have played more had it been a close game. I think tonight, as long as this game is close, we get at least 30 minutes from Mike Conley. He has been a point-per-minute player this year. At 6,100, when this guy is fully healthy, I think he's going to be priced closer to 7K. So we still are getting a little bit of a discount on him. I don't mind Mike Conley on this slate. He should be lower owned as well. Someone you could target in tournaments, but I don't think I'm going to really be going to anyone else on the Jazz outside of Conley. Don't really like Mitchell or Gobert or Clarkson. So we can go ahead and move on to the Miami side. Now, in terms of injuries today, I think this Miami team is one of the most important teams because we do have to watch the status of Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo is currently questionable for this game. This is a huge injury. I mean, this is going to impact a lot. Obviously, Adebayo is a high-usage player. He's also a guy that plays a ton of minutes, so there'd be more usage to go around. There'd be more minutes to go around if Adebayo were to sit. But if Adebayo plays, I don't really like him either at 9K. In this matchup against the Jazz, it's just not a great spot for Adebayo. He's not someone that really I feel like I need to get to at 9K. Jimmy Butler's been amazing lately. He does maybe still feel a little bit too cheap. Like, we've seen the massive upside that Jimmy Butler has on a nightly basis. I mean, he can go out there and put up 60 fantasy points any night. Again, in this matchup against a good Jazz team that's been playing good defense that does play pretty slow. Neither one of Butler or Adebayo look like top plays today. We got to watch the status of Tyler Hero. If he's out again, that's a bump for Nunn and Dragic, but I don't love Nunn or Dragic at their price points. Really, if Bam plays, if Hero plays, even if Hero's out, I don't think that affects too much. But if Bam plays, I don't really like much from this Heat team at all. But if Bam does get ruled out, then that is going to change a ton because that's going to open up a lot of value. I think Jimmy Butler would get a bump. He'd be someone I would definitely be considering if Bam were to sit. I would like Butler a little bit more. I'd like Dragic more as well. I think Dragic would get more usage coming off the bench, and he's still affordable at 5,200. I'd like Dragic a little bit more as well if Tyler Hero were to sit. But really, we got to talk about the bigs. So if Adebayo sits, I'd assume we either see Kelly Olynyk slide down and start at center, or they would move Precious Achiuwa into the starting lineup, and Precious Achiuwa could start at center. Either way, if Bam sits, I think it's a bump for Kelly Olynyk, and Kelly Olynyk becomes a really, really good option at 4,600. And if Precious Achiuwa were to start, minimum salary $3K, power forward and center eligible, he'd be probably the best value play on the slate. It's not a good matchup at all, but Precious Achiuwa, he's been a good point per minute player this year for the Heat. Obviously, he doesn't get a ton of minutes because he just backs up Bam, and we know Bam plays close to 40 minutes a night, but without Bam, I think we would probably get like 28 to 30 minutes from Precious Achiuwa, if not a few more. He'd be a great value play. It'd be hard to get away from him if he does wind up starting for Bam Adebayo. And then Kelly Olynyk, I'd actually like quite a bit as well, because I think Kelly Olynyk would get more center minutes. He'd be a really good option that you could target at 4,600. He'd be someone that I would definitely be looking to, but that really does it for the Heat today. If Bam plays, not too much interest. If Bam is out, though, that changes a lot. That makes me really like Kelly Olynyk and Precious Achiuwa. It'd give a bump to Jimmy Butler, give a bump to Goran Dragic. But yeah, we can go ahead and move on to the next game. So looking at the Hawks and the Thunder, this is probably one of my favorite games to target on this slate. I do like a ton here on both sides. I think Trae Young, one of my favorite GPP plays. I definitely think he's going to be, I don't want to say he's going to be low owned, but I think he's going to probably be lower owned than he should be. He's just been playing so well lately. Even at 9,900, I still think Trae Young has plenty of upside to pay off this price point. This OKC team, they're not good defensively at all. The OKC, outside of Lou Dort, doesn't really have any good defenders. Sure, OKC could throw Lou Dort on Trae Young, but Trae Young's just such a high usage player. This offense runs through him that I'm not really too worried about that. I think Young can still go out there and have a big game, and I do like multiple guys from the Thunder. So if I'm playing multiple guys from the Thunder today, it does make sense to maybe run it back from someone on Atlanta. Really do like Trae Young quite a bit. He is really nicely priced on Yahoo. He's been too cheap over there for a while now. And once again, I think at $41, Trae Young does, once again look too cheap on Yahoo. But like Clint Capella, John Collins, I'm not as interested in them. John Collins is super cheap. I think it's $6,400. At this price point, he is someone I have some interest in. He's been really bad lately. We haven't really seen a good game from John Collins in a while. I mean, the last time he put up over 40 DraftKings points was against Dallas, almost 2 weeks ago. We know Collins could go out there and put up 40-plus fantasy points any night, though. At $6,400, he's interesting on the slate as a lower-owned option. Him and Trae Young are the two guys I do have interest in from Atlanta. Danilo Gallinari had a huge game off the bench, but I don't know if I really want to chase that, especially if Cam Reddish returns for this game. Cam Reddish is questionable. I'm just not going to go to Gallinari at 5K. I know he had 50 fantasy points last game, but I'm just not chasing that. We've seen Gallo just still has a really low floor. That's just a game he shot 10 for 12 from 3. Like, you just can't expect that to happen again. So, yeah, I think it's Trae Young. It's John Collins, who's in my opinion, a little bit too cheap. And really not too much else I'll be looking to on the Thunder today, or on the Hawks. So we can go ahead and move on to the other side with OKC. So OKC, they are dealing with some injuries today. We have already gotten word that Al Horford is out for rest. Hamidou Diallo is also out for this game. I don't think Diallo being out affects too much, but with Al Horford out, that does give us some value. Isaiah Roby at 4,900, I think he does look like a really strong value play on the slate. I do like him a good amount on both sides. He has power forward eligibility on DK, and on Yahoo, he is super cheap over there, and he is power forward, which makes him really appealing. Only $13 on Yahoo. So with Al Horford out, I am assuming that once again we see Isaiah Roby draw the start at center. He did start their game against Miami when Horford was out. He didn't play that well, just 21 DraftKings points in 28 minutes. But we've seen in spot starts this year, Isaiah Roby can go out there and put up 30 plus fantasy points. He's been close to a point per minute player. He's probably going to play around 30 minutes tonight if this game stays close. And even if it blows out, you probably would still see Roby out there in a blowout. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this game will stay close, but yeah, I feel really good about Isaiah Roby. It's a good matchup as well. It's a much better matchup than last time against Miami. Better matchup here against the Hawks. At 4,900, I don't think he projects as like an awesome value play. It's not like he's minimum salary or anything, but he still has plenty of upside to give you 30 plus fantasy points and be a good play at 4,900. Could definitely give you 6x value. So really do like Isaiah Roby with Al Horford out. And then don't want to forget SGA. I think SGA, he's one of my favorite pay-up options. Him and Trae Young, I like a lot today. If I can get them in the same lineup, I'm going to try and do that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, but really do like SGA here. 8,800 on DK. May still be a little bit too cheap. On Yahoo, he definitely looks too cheap over there. I'm at $36. I like him quite a bit on both sides. We know this offense is going to run through SGA. He's going to be the guy that dominates the usage. Without Hamidou Diallo, I just think that's even better for SGA. No Al Horford either. So, SGA is just going to go out there and do everything. He's going to take probably 20 to 25 shots. We know he's a guy that can contribute, with the peripherals. He can get rebounds, he can get assists, he can get steals as well. I mean, he's got plenty of upside. He put up 61 DK points last game against San Antonio. I mean, this is someone that can go out there and put up 50, 60 DK points any night in a good matchup against Atlanta in what should be a pretty good fast-paced game. I think right now the total in this game is at 223.5, which is not incredibly low. That's pretty decent. So definitely like SGA here. We know just this entire Thunder offense runs through him. I don't mind paying nearly $9K for him. People may think that's a little bit too expensive, but in this matchup with how good SGA's been playing, with Horford being out, with Diallo being out, I think the workload's going to be even heavier for Gilgeous-Alexander. So he's one of my favorite plays today for sure, but I don't think I'm going to be getting to anything else on OKC outside of SGA and Roby. With Hamidou Diallo out, maybe you see Theo Maledon get more minutes. I mean, he's already been playing pretty big minutes. He's not a great point per minute player, but we're probably going to get like 35, 36 minutes from Theo Maledon, maybe even a few more. He'd be viable at 4,500, but I think it's really SGA and Roby for me on the Thunder. So we can go ahead and move on to the next one, the Hornets and the Warriors. Well, so on the Hornets today, we do have a pretty big injury to watch here with Cody Zeller. So Cody Zeller is currently listed as questionable. This is a pretty impactful injury. I would assume that if Cody Zeller is out, we would either see Bismack Biyombo draw the start at center, or they would just slide PJ Washington down and let him start at center. I'd assume Biyombo would start. If Bismack Biyombo were to start with Cody Zeller out, if he were to be out, at 3,300, we'd probably get like 24, 25 minutes from Biyombo. In this matchup against a small ball Warriors team, I don't think Biyombo is going to be needed as much, but he would still probably get at least 22 to 24 minutes at only 3,300. Bismack Biyombo would definitely be a solid value play if he were to wind up starting for Cody Zeller. PJ Washington would get a lot of backup 5 minutes in a small ball or against a small ball Warriors team. Like, this sets up a lot better for PJ Washington than it does for Bismack Biyombo. So I think at 5,400, PJ Washington would look very appealing if Cody Zeller were to sit. But then you have guys like, LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier. I think at their price points, they're just, tournament options. I don't think either one project incredibly well for their salary, but obviously we know LaMelo and Rozier have massive upside. If I had to play one, I think I would prefer to go to LaMelo just because he can contribute more with peripherals. But neither one are like top options for me. Now, Gordon Hayward, at his price tag, I actually like quite a bit. 6,700 for Gordon Hayward. He's been playing pretty bad lately, and that's one of the reasons we've seen his price come down to as low as it is. He hasn't put up over 40 fantasy points in it's been 7 straight games with less than 40 fantasy points for Gordon Hayward. But in a pretty good matchup against a fast-paced Warriors team at only 6,700, Gordon Hayward is definitely someone I do have interest in. I think he is too cheap. Him, PJ Washington, if Zeller's out, and Bismack Biyombo, those 3 guys are the 3 guys I will be looking to from the Hornets today. Obviously, Washington and Biyombo all depends on if Cody Zeller plays. If he's out, then both those guys do become very solid options. But we can go ahead and move on to the Warriors. On the Warriors, there really isn't much I like on this team. I think everyone's just kind of appropriately priced. Steph always has upside, can always go off and pop off at random times. There's just other studs I'd rather get to. I mean, give me SGA for cheaper. Give me Chris Paul for 2K cheaper. Give me like De'Aaron Fox for 2K cheaper. I don't think I'm going to get to Curry. Draymond Green, it is a good matchup. He did have a pretty good game against Charlotte when they last played, I believe. Or he didn't have that good of a game, actually. He was pretty bad, but we've seen the last 2 games, like Draymond still has plenty of upside, can go out there and put up over 40 fantasy points any night. We know he's still going to get 36 to 37 minutes if it's a close game. I don't mind Draymond. He'd probably be my favorite guy to play from Golden State today, but outside of Draymond, there really isn't much I like on the Warriors. This is going to be a team I'm pretty low on. I don't expect to really be on any Warriors today. Maybe Draymond, but that's basically it. So looking at the last game of the night, Portland and the Lakers. So in Portland, with how they're priced, the only 2 guys I like on Portland today are Damian Lillard and Enes Kanter. I think Damian Lillard, this isn't the best matchup against the Lakers, but we know the upside that Lillard has when CJ McCollum's off the floor. We've seen him go out there and just put up 60, 70 fantasy points basically any night. I mean, he can do that any night. Again, I don't think Lillard's like my favorite stud. I think there's other guys I would rather pay up for today. But if you want to target Lillard at low ownership, I assume he will be low owned today. He's obviously someone you could get to as a lower owned tournament play. Enes Kanter, I think, is definitely too cheap. I do like him a good amount on both sides. Between him or DeAndre Ayton, I think I do prefer to go to Ayton. But 6,800 for Kanter on DK. On Yahoo, he's pretty affordable over there, $24. Like, that's just too cheap for Enes Kanter when he's playing, I mean, he got 38 minutes last game. I don't know if he plays 38 minutes today, but when we're getting 34, 35 minutes from Enes Kanter, like, he should be over 7K basically every night. You know, he hasn't shown massive upside, but he can still go out there and get you a double-double, get you 40-plus fantasy points any night. The minutes are obviously going to be there. We've seen him play the minutes, you know, basically every game with Nurkic out. He's been getting over 30 minutes a night. I think we get over 30 minutes from Kanter, and at 6,800 could definitely easily give you, you know, 6x value on this price point. So I do like Enes Kanter. Probably would lean 8 and over him, but Kanter is for sure in play. But I don't think I'm going to go to anyone else on Portland outside of Lillard and Kanter. I'll at least mention Derrick Jones Jr. because he has been playing really well lately. He still is super cheap on Yahoo. He's only $14 at small forward. He's been playing 30 to 32 minutes. He's been, you know, I don't know if he's going to keep up this production, but he's been really good lately. 5 straight games with at least 23 fantasy points on Yahoo. If you need a cheap small forward, I think Derrick Jones Jr. is in play. But we can go ahead and move on to the Lakers side. So the Lakers, there's a lot of guys listed as questionable, but a lot of these guys are actually probable, like LeBron, Kuzma, Schroeder. They're all probable, so they're all expected to play today. Honestly, when you factor in price, I think my favorite guy to target from the Lakers today is probably Dennis Schroeder. He is expected back for this game. He is listed as probable. We've seen with AD out when Schroeder was playing, you know, the game against OKC, I think AD was out for that game. The game against Minnesota, AD was out that game. I know he's had some bad games with AD out, but Schroeder's upside does, you know, it is higher when AD is off the floor. He does get more usage. He's been playing pretty good minutes as well. It's a good matchup against a pretty fast-paced Portland team. Or I don't think Portland's been as fast this year. They're about middle of the pack, but they've still been a really bad defensive team. So at $5,900 on DK, on Yahoo, Schroeder is coming in at $17. You know, between him and Saban Lee, that's a close one for me. I think I lean Saban Lee, but yeah, Dennis Schroeder looks like a really good option. I think without AD, he does benefit. He is someone that I like. You know, I was playing basically every slate when AD was out. You know, he's been out for these last few games. I liked him a lot against Minnesota. I liked him a lot that day against Brooklyn. Obviously, he wound up not playing that slate, but yeah, I think without AD, Schroeder should be, you know, over 6K. We're still getting a pretty nice price on him at $5,900. So he's my favorite guy from the Lakers today. LeBron, you know, out of all the guys above 10K, I think LeBron's probably my favorite. Between him, Sabonis, or Lillard, I think LeBron would be the guy that I go to there. Still, I don't know if I'm going to be going out of my way to play LeBron today, but he is definitely viable. We know all the opportunity is going to be there for LeBron. This is a matchup where you would expect LeBron to have plenty of success against a pretty bad Portland defense. Kuzma, don't really like his DK price. He actually went back to the bench last game. Tough to really go to him. Montrezl Harrell, at his price tag, I don't really have that much interest in. I think there's just other centers I'd rather get to. So really, it's just LeBron and Dennis Schroeder for me. Now, I do want to mention Talen Horton-Tucker. He actually did start last game, and he did play 30 minutes. I have no idea if he starts again, but if he does, for $3,600, I'd assume we get probably, you know, mid to high 20s in minutes from Tucker, maybe a few more if he's playing well. He did get some blowout run that last game. He'd be viable at $3,600 if he is starting again, but I don't really know what they're going to do with their starting lineup. I'd assume you're going to see Dennis Schroeder back in the starting lineup. You're going to see KCP in there. It's probably going to be Schroeder, KCP, LeBron, and, you know, Marc Gasol will be in there. So then, you know, who's going to start at the 4? Is it going to be Kuzma? Is it going to be Markieff Morris like it was last game? Do they let THT start again? We'll have to keep an eye on it. But if THT does start, he would be viable at $3,600. But that does it for the Lakers today, guys. That does it for all 9 games. I think we broke everything down team by team. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I do appreciate you watching. If you did enjoy, hit that like button down below before you do get out of here. Hit that subscribe button as well. Be sure to click the notification bell so that way you do get notified every time I upload. You never miss out on any of my new videos, and you also get notified every time I do go live. I will be live streaming Friday afternoon around 4:30 Eastern time. So if you are able to tune in, I'll be live on my YouTube channel answering all your guys' questions, breaking down the slate once again, talking through everything. So tune into the live stream, guys. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Hope you enjoyed the video, and good luck tonight, guys. Appreciate you watching. Peace.